Hi, I'm Penny, and welcome back to Penny's Reading Corner. Today I'm going to read to you The Elves and the Shoemaker. There once was a poor shoemaker and his wife. "This is my last piece of leather," said the shoemaker sadly. "I can only make one more pair of shoes." The shoemaker cut out the leather and put it on his workbench. They went up to bed. The next morning, the old shoemaker found a new pair of shoes on his workbench. "Who made these shoes?" asked the shoemaker. "He put them in the shop window. A man saw the shoes. He came into the shop and tried them on." "I like these shoes," said the man. "I will buy them from you." Now the old shoemaker could buy more leather. He cut out the leather and put it on the workbench. Then he went up to bed. The next morning there was a new pair of boots and a new pair of shoes on the workbench. "Who has made these boots and shoes?" asked the shoemaker's wife. The old shoemaker soon sold both pairs of shoes. Now he could buy even more leather. He cut out the leather and went up to bed. The next morning he found 8 new pairs of boots and shoes. And so it went on for weeks and weeks. Everyone liked his boots and shoes. Soon they were rich, but they still didn't know who was making the shoes. So they made a plan. The old shoemaker cut out the leather and he put it on his workbench. But this time they didn't go to bed. They hid instead. "Now we will see who makes the shoes," said the shoemaker. The old shoemaker and his wife waited and waited. At last, the shop door opened and 2 tiny elves ran in. They jumped up onto the workbench and sewed the leather as fast as they could. Like magic, the shoes were finished. The elves danced a little jig on the workbench. Trip, tip, 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 tap. Then they jumped down. The elves ran away into the night. They're still jiggling. "Those elves are very kind to us," said the shoemaker. "Yes," said his wife, "but their clothes are old and thin. They must be so cold." The shoemaker nodded his head. "The winter snow is on the ground, and they don't even have any shoes," he said. "How can we help the elves?" said the shoemaker's wife. The next day, the shoemaker and his wife set to work. What do you think they made? That's right. 2 tiny coats, 2 tiny pairs of trousers, and 2 tiny pairs of boots. Trousers, and 2 tiny pairs of boots. They looked just right for the tiny elves. Teeny tiny clothes. They put the presents on the workbench. Then they waited and waited. At last, the shop door opened and it ran the two tiny elves. They jumped up onto the workbench and saw the parents. They danced a little jig. Tip, tip, tap. 2 for you and 2 for me. The tiny elves put on their tiny clothes. They are just right, they said. They danced a little jig all along the workbench. Tip, tip, tap. Thank you, they called as they jumped down. The tiny elves did another jig on their way out of the shop. Tip, tip, tap. Puzzle time. Which 2 words rhyme? 4 can rhyme and his man can. Which word does not match the picture? Elves, jig, night. Night. Which word matches the picture? Shop, shoe, show. Shoe. Who kites the weather? Shoemaker, wife, elves. Shoemaker. Which sentence is right? They sewed as fast as they could. They sewed as slowly as they could. They sewed as fast as they could. The end. I like this book because the elves were kind to them and they made some shoes so they could buy more leather, and the parents were nice to them because they gave them clothes. That's why I liked. See you tomorrow on Penny's Reading Corner. Bye. I'm going to do a recount of the story. First, there was a shoemaker and a wife. They only had 1 piece of leather left and they cut it out. But they didn't make a shoe out of it. The next morning, there was another shoe. They didn't make it. They only had 1 piece of leather left and they didn't make it into a shoe. Next, a man came and bought the shoe that they didn't make. And then they got more money so they could buy more leather. Following that, they didn't fall asleep because they wanted to know who made the shoes and boots for them because they didn't know at all. Then they still didn't fall asleep. I bet they were so tired. And once the door opened in the shop, it was elves. The elves made the shoes because they knew they were poor because they heard them. After, they made clothes for them because they looked really cold and it looked like they were going to be sick. So they made them clothes for them to wear and they put them in presents so they didn't know what it was straight away. Later on, the elves went on the workbench to see what was inside the presents. Finally, the elves were so happy they were jiggling and they were tip-tip-tapping on the floor. They were so excited they got clothes to wear. The end. Bye.
How do you think the shoemaker and his wife felt when they saw the shoes every morning?
They felt happy. And they were trying to make clothes for the ones who made those shoes because they were grateful for them.
So do you think why do you think the shoemaker only cut the leather the first time? Why do you think he didn't do the shoes?
Because he didn't know which kind of shoes to make and designs for it.
What do you think the elves thought when they saw the presents?
They were happy, excited because they thought it was new shoes or clothes.
And do you think the elves and the shoemaker can be friends? And why?
Yes, they can be friends because they made something for each other, and it was nice for them to do that because the elves made shoes and they made clothes.
Do you think the elves will keep coming?
Yeah.
Why?
And to help them design and make shoes together so they can be best friends.
All right. Bye.
Bye.